John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. The love of God so vast and free, the love of God it is to me, the very best that there can be. I found it so. I found it so. And thank the Lord, thousands more have found it so too. John 3:16 has been used by the Lord in the conversion of many, many poor sinners. It's a very well-known verse this. All the children learned. And I was working amongst the children. Well, I found one, hardly 2.5 years of age, who could repeat John 3:16. And the mother of that little girl is here in our midst tonight. Yes, I tried every place I went, and I couldn't get anyone to beat that. Yes, God has used it mightily. He has used it in very many strange ways at the same time. You all know the Irish version of it, how the little Irish urchin in the city of Dublin was found by a policeman lying in a doorway. This kindly-hearted policeman woke up the little boy and asked him why he was there. Why was he not in his own home? He replied that he had no home. Well, the policeman said, look here, you go to a certain street, a certain number, knock at the door. Someone will come out, and you just say John 3:16, and he'll let you in. Well, you all know the consequence of that story. Now you're going to have the Honduran version of John 3:16. But I think, first of all, we had better fill you in with some little history about Sinon, the Mosquito Indian boy that we're going to speak about. He lived in the Mesquite district in Honduras. Now that is a piece of land that lies between Guatemala, pardon me, it borders Nicaragua, and it has been a bone of contention for a long, long time. Many unpleasant words have gone from one country to the other because of that. Now that was a very much neglected part of Honduras, and that's where the trouble lay. Now it was a little different than the rest of the country. The Sambo Indians lived there, and they were a little different from the Latinas and the other Indians of the country. So I'll just give you a little outline of the situation. Those living there seemed to have more of an English flavor, while in the rest of the country it was a Spanish flavor. Now, I'm sure that part of the country at one time had been taken over by the English. In fact, some have told me that right from British Honduras, or what used to be British Honduras, which is now Belize, belonged to England, and a strip of land 10 miles wide along the coast right into the border of Nicaragua. However, I don't know so much about that, but one thing I do know, lying between the Indian villages and the Sambo villages, we found an old cemetery. We have been told that there was one somewhere around there, and we made investigations, my wife and I, when we were younger, and we excavated 6 or 8 inches down, and there we came on the tombstones. There was the Right Honorable William Pitt. I must have been some relation to the famous Pitt in England. And there was the family of Hewitt, too. And there was quite a few of these tombstones, all buried. One of them drew my attention. It was a little child. Now, there must have been an epidemic amongst the children at that time, because there's quite a few children's graves. This was in the year 1700 and some odd. There this stone said, "Mourn not for me, for I am blessed, and in Christ's arms I take my rest." That was a little girl. I'm not sure whether it was one of the Hewitts or one of the Pitts. However, there's that graveyard. And an exhibition was formed here in Los Angeles to go and investigate more. But I'm afraid it never got off the ground. However, that was a wonderful part of the country too, famous for many things. That's where the great White City, the lost White City is, somewhere in the Mesquite district. After I had made a trip there, came home, I found Mr. Fox from the New York Times, and he was down to investigate and look up the lost White City. He did all in his power to get me to go, but I was looking for lost black sinners. I had not much interest in the lost White City. I inquired a little about it when I was down that way. Some had seen it at a distance, but when they got others to go with them to look it up again, they couldn't find it. So there it was to this day, and hasn't been found yet. But although the lost White City was never found, yet many black lost sinners were found. And I think that's better still. These Sambos live a very primitive life. They sleep on the mud floor of their little huts. Their bed is made, especially the spring mattress, of the bark of a tree. And also their covering is the tree bark too. In fact, I have seen some of the dear women folk use it as a skirt, and it comes in very handy at times. Now, of course, they have enemies, as many others do. And one of the chief enemies seemed to be the evil spirits. And they're troubled quite a lot by these evil spirits. Now, if one takes sick, seriously sick, of course, that's the work of an evil spirit. So therefore, the witch doctor is called in to take care of that. So what they generally do, they get about a dozen or 18 boys, go out to the forest and cut down some sticks about 6 feet high or a little more, and about 1 or 2 inches thick. And they bring those and they stick them in the ground very close together and make a kind of a circle until they've just a space large enough to let anyone in. And there's room inside just enough for 2 people. So the sick person, be it a man or woman, is brought along and put inside that. The witch doctor goes in too. And there are quite a number of witnesses outside. They, of course, their duty is to watch for the evil spirit going out of that little circle. The witch doctor enters and he performs his many activities, and then at last out goes the evil spirit out through the door. Now, I would suggest that that evil spirit has been fixed up beforehand using glowworms or flies which produce a light, and there's plenty of those down there. So you get quite a quantity of those in a ball, and when he performs enough, he throws this ball out through the opening, and the crowd outside gives a cheer. The evil spirit is gone. So now what happens? The witch doctor comes out as fast as he can, while 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 boys have extra poles in their hands. So they close that space completely, so that the witch doctor will not, the spirit will not find its way back. So there you are. And that poor lady or poor man stays there for I can't say how long, but for quite a while, to make sure that there'll be no more trouble. Now, they are very primitive people, as I said. They try to live near a river where they have water and fish. And of course, they go out hunting and kill any kind of animal that they can find. A danto, a wild pig, or anything else. And then there's the lizards, of course, the iguanas. And they bring them in, and they don't eat as we do. Perhaps they'll not eat for 3 or 4 days. And then when they do eat, they do eat. They clean everything up, everything that there is. Well, it's rather nice food at times, but you don't know what it is. I always advise everybody, set it before me, don't tell me what it is, and I'm all right. I find that's the best way. My mother had that way. Eat what you'll set before you and ask no questions. So I found it as a wonderful way. Don't ask any questions. The iguana, sometimes they have a steak of a snake. Well, that's very good too, if you don't know what it is. And you see, I find in bringing up children, that's one of the big mistakes mothers make. When something is brought down that they haven't seen for a while and offered to little Tommy, oh, she said, maybe Tommy won't like it. Well, what is she doing? She's putting a suggestion into Tommy's head that there's something particular about this. And of course he said, no, I don't like it, before he even tastes it. But if you were to taste an iguana, which you can see isn't very palatable when it's running about, but I tell you on the table it's very nice, very like chicken. So they live on those things. Now then, they are very different in many other ways. But I think we have told you enough so that we can go on now with the real part of the story and tell you about what God did with John 3:16. I was told that a small gasoline power boat was to call in at Trujillo and perhaps go up the coast the length of the Mosquito district. So I started to prepare to get ready. Now I suppose you'd better get to the bank and see if there's any money. No, there's no money where we're going. So we'll have to try something else. So we'll pack our bag with all kinds of beads and ornaments of all descriptions and plenty of pills, especially aspirin. And if there's anything for malaria that we can put our hands on, and all such things as that, salves and everything else. And of course the main cargo was the Gospel of St. John, and that was a rather heavy one. Paper's always heavy. So Doña Nettie got busy and made some of her special bread, guaranteed to keep for over a month good and fresh. She was a very good cook in her day and was able to do some wonderful things in that line. Well, after waiting day after day after day, which you have to do down there, for every day as mañana. So at last the boat came. So away we went. We spent all that day and the next night and eventually got to Bruce Lagoon. That was on the Mosquito Coast. So there I spent the day amongst those dear Sambo Indians and leaving a gospel in each home. Then we found out that the boat people were going up the Patuxent River. Of course, the gasoline boat was too big to go up the river, so we went up on a big canoe with an outboard motor. And the canoe was full of salt and other provisions. Now, these men were interested in alligator skins, so that's what they were after. So up we went and came to a village and stopped there and found that they had quite a number of alligator skins ready. So those were put on board, and salt was left off so that those who were hunting could skin them and salt them and keep them for the next trip. So on and on we went up the Patuxent River until darkness began to fall. And there we camped on the banks of that river. Well, I tried to sleep, but I had to fight the mosquitoes practically all night. I'm not afraid of mosquitoes, not in the same one word, but I'm afraid of the malaria that they give you. They're very obliging, and they'll give you malaria very, very easily. And when you get that a few times, the doctor will advise you, now you've got to be very careful. The next time it may be blackwater fever. And we can't guarantee your life once you get that. Well, however, the next day we're off again, and they came to their journey's end. So, provision or other transportation had to be looked up, and we found a big canoe and men willing to pull us up the river another day's journey. As we went up the river, well, there was always some small villages. And of course, I made arrangements to get off and go and visit the dear people. And there, of course, my word had gone before. The missionary was on his way. Now, a missionary is one who is supposed to do all kinds of miracles and all kinds of things. So at each place we went to, there were the halt, the maimed, and the blind, all waiting. Well, of course, a few pills helps out. At least that satisfies them for the moment. And the next moment I won't be there, of course. So we left them the pills and all that they would like to have, and above all the Gospel of St. John. And on we went until we came to near the end of the line. And that happened to be a banana camp, way far up the Patuxent River. We found some Germans that had gone up there, and that was no man's land, of course, so they had planted bananas, and they were trying to make a living out of that. Now, they don't work there, and they haven't the strikes they have the way they have here. And they have to bargain, first of all, for their work. So money has nothing to do in it. What good is money? Money's no good. You can't do anything with money. Nothing to buy up there. And of course they have a commissary there with all kinds of goods in it. And materials, shirts, pants, shoes, socks, whatever you like. And I was there, and it was rather interesting to see those men come in who were looking for work. They didn't ask how much they were going to earn. They looked at a pair of shoes, and they didn't ask the price of the shoes. They asked, how many days' work do we need to work to get these shoes? Oh, those are good shoes. You'll have to work for 14 days to get that. All right. They would rather have the shoes than anything else, so the bargain was sealed. Their name was put on the shoes, and away they went. And after 14 days, they would come back, and then they would get their shoes. So that's the way they were working. Well, I, of course, had spent all my time possible on reaching as many people as I could, because I was told that the boat was going down on a certain day. And if I wasn't there, well, I mightn't get for some considerable time. So I made arrangements. Time came. Of course, I had to wait a few days extra, always a mañana. But those days extra soon went in. And then I got the boat and went down to Bruce Lagoon. Went down to Bruce Lagoon. Well, of course, I had to make arrangements to get home. But, of course, there was no gasoline-powered boat there to take me. So I had to look for a guide. And this guide was supposed to take me to a certain lake where we'd find a little boat, cayuca they call them. And there we'd cross the lake and wouldn't have so far to walk. We got to the lake, but there was no boat there. Where is the boat? Oh, I know where it is, my guide said. Whoever came along here, they wanted to go to the other side, and they took the boat, and there'll be 3 or 4 boats there who are waiting for someone coming back, but no one has come back yet. What will we do? Can you walk? He said, I can walk. Sure, I can walk, I said. But can you? Oh, he laughed. Well, we started out to walk. And we walked and walked and walked and walked. And after that, we walked some more again. And we kept on walking, and then at last we got to a place where we could just stay the night. And then the next morning, the contract was that he was to take me on to where the train comes. But the poor guide lost himself. And there we were. And it was in big tall grass. And you couldn't see. He lost his way somehow. And we're in this tall grass, wandering about there. At last he said, you'd better stay here. You'll be too tired, I'm sure, and I'll go and look for the path. And away he went. Well, I got a funny feeling after I was there for about an hour. And I was beginning to get hungry and tired. But however, he came back. And I noticed as he left, he had his machete working, and this time he was going to mark his way. So he marked his way. And after he came back, I found the place, he said. Now, all we had to do was to walk for 15 minutes after that, after all that. And there was the railroad. So therefore, he went his way home, and I waited on the train coming. Of course, it was a banana train, where every banana is a guest, and every passenger is a pest. However, I was able to flag the train down. And although I was a passenger and not a banana, they welcomed me on board. Well, however, of course the train was late, as ever, and I was rather late in getting home. And I think I had to wake my good wife up out of a nice sleep. She did not take long to prepare a meal fit for the king, and my, I enjoyed it. She was a wonderful cook at that time, and she could turn out some wonderful meals. Well, now, I would like to take you back in your thoughts again to the Mesquite district and those Sambo Indians. One day, there was a little boy by the name of Sinon. Now, Sinon, barefooted, was pattering along the narrow path with high grass on each side of him, when suddenly he stopped. He saw something that was very rare to see in that part of the world at that time. What was it? It was only a little piece of paper. That's all it was. But you don't often meet a little piece of paper there. No, it's very scarce. There are more banana leaves and other leaves that you take when you go to buy whatever you want to buy. That is, if you can get it at all. But it's wrapped up in banana leaf. So paper is something that they don't often see, unless it's from the paper tree. Well, however, he looked at this and was very careful in lifting it up. There might be, well, a scorpion underneath it or something, and by experience, I suppose, he knew that he'd better be careful. But he did. He lifted it up, and it was all dirt. What do you think it was? Well, it was John 3:16. That's what it was. One of those gospels that had been given out evidently fell in the hands of those who did not care for such a thing, and they tore it up. But you see, God often uses his enemies for his honor and for his glory. So little Sinon lifted it up, and thanked the Lord he was able to read a little, which many of those dear people cannot do. And he looked at it, porque de tal manera, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That's what he read. Well, he did not understand it. He did not know very much about love in any way. And as for God, well, who was he? However, he thought it was a wonderful thing. And he began to repeat it until he could say it by memory. And he called that his own little, I don't know, some script or something. He put his name on it, and he thought it was his own. However, time went by, and he grew up to be a young man. And he had heard of the big world that existed outside of the Mesquite district, and he often heard how things were there, wonderful things. And he wished that he could make a trip to the big world outside. So eventually he was able to do that. So of course the only way he had to go was on foot. So he started off and he walked and he walked and he walked. And then he walked some more after that again. Well, it took him some considerable time to walk. But eventually he got to Trujillo. Now, in Trujillo, like in many of the other towns in Honduras, there is a park, a central park. Now, especially on Saturdays and on Sundays, the people gather together and they walk around the park. The young men walk in one direction and the young ladies with their I forget the word, escort, walk in another direction, facing each other. And of course things are much stricter than here. That was quite a number of years ago. Perhaps today it's a little different. I'm afraid it is. But the young ladies would have their aunts with them, their mothers with them, or some of their relatives with them. And of course, as they pass the boys, they give them a wink. And sometimes the girls slipped a little piece of paper into the hands of the boys. But however, let that go. Sinon got to a certain place in the park, and you know, the little gospel hall was right in front of the park. It was a big room in the house that we had rented. And when he got there, what do you think he heard? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. He stopped quickly. What's that? Where did I hear that before? And he remembered then how it was that he found this little paper. But sad to say, the meeting was over. I, of course, was the only speaker there for many months after that and before that too. So I generally closed the gospel meeting quoting John 3:16. So I had closed the meeting quoting that wonderful verse. Well, the congregation got out, the door was closed, and that was all to it. The next day, away Sinon went. He went now to look to see what he could see and elsewhere. The train took him, of course, through many banana camps. And he got to one, he got off, and they inquired there if they could give him work. Oh, of course they could give him work. Did he have a machete? No, he didn't have a machete. So they gave him a machete on credit and started out. Well, however, that night, first of all, there was no electric light there, and it was dark, dark, dark. But he saw a light shining in the sky, and that was the gasoline coalman lamp that the Christians had when they were going to have a meeting, as I have described before. So he saw that light, and then he heard some singing, and he made in the direction of that light and the singing. And when he got near the place, what do you think he heard? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. There was the third time now that he had come in contact with that wonderful verse. And this time he didn't wait. He acted it on, he told me afterwards. And when he got to the door, they were just finishing quoting John 3:16. He was invited in, and he sat down. And the dear brother went ahead and explained something about John 3 and 16. And he brought out man's need. And he told them how they had sinned against God, and how that sin was going to take them to a place of punishment in eternity. And he was very faithful in bringing out some of the sins that they're guilty of down there. Sinon was listening, taking in every word. And at the end of the meeting he sat on, and they came down and they spoke to Sinon. Tears in his eyes, he asked them, please explain something more. And they did. They explained that. And then he said, yes, I understand it now. I know what it is now. So God saved him there and then. Now, God is only one way of saving a sinner, as I've told you before. But it's the experience that's different, both before and after. Now, I see the time is gone. I could tell you lots more about Sinon. I'll just go on because I was late. I'll take that as an excuse. However, the first time I met him, he had a Sunday school. I hadn't visited that place for some time, but when I got there, they had told me about him. And now he was getting the children together, and he was teaching them John 3 and 16. And when I was introduced to him, and he told me his story, well, of course, I knew a lot from it, from experience in the past. And he asked me a question. Where could I get about 100 John 3 and 16? I said, I can get them to you very easily. What do you want them for? I want to go back and visit my own people and take them the wondrous story that I have heard here. I got him the little Gospels, and away he went. And I'm sure that God used those messages. For today, there are Christians there.